This is Simon from BYU-I Radio. This week, Democratic Senator James Ruchti of Pocatello joins us to talk about main events in the legislature, potential budget cuts and his solutions, and his plans for the rest of the legislative session. What's been happening this week in the legislature, and just what the atmosphere and activity level has been like this week.
Yeah, it's been a little slow these first, I guess this is our third week now. So it's been a little slow, meaning there aren't as many bills as normal coming through committees, but there's been a lot of activity behind the scenes. And that's because of the budget cuts. You know, the budget cuts that we're facing, the deficits that we have, budget deficits, are kind of taking all the oxygen out of the room. That's what everybody's worried about. We have to figure out, we got two choices because we have to balance our budget under the Idaho Constitution. So we've either got to cut budgets because we don't have enough revenue, or we need to go find more revenue, or some combination of that. And so that's what people are focused on.
And in addition to that, there's a new bill that was introduced that we wanted to get your comment on by Representative Hill, a bill that would incur fines for cities that fly non-approved flags. So we would just love to get your comment on that new proposed bill as well.
Yeah, it isn't the sort of thing that the Idaho legislature should be focusing on. Local governments can figure out what sort of flags they need to fly at their, offices. We really need to be focused on, making sure that Idahoans have health care. We need to make sure that they can live affordably in Idaho, that housing is more affordable. But worrying about flags and who flies what type of flags seems like something we don't need to spend time on.
And I know that you've mentioned the balancing of the budget and the additional cuts that have been asked to be made. In addition to that, we got your press release for your town halls. So what are some of your goals or reasoning behind holding those town halls and on those subjects? I would love to just hear some more about that.
Yeah, well, when the legislature is looking at cutting budgets, I think it is extremely important that the legislators, that represent those communities, go back to the community and find out how these budget cuts are going to affect them. So I served in the legislature during the Great Recession, and we cut budgets to the bone. We just didn't have revenue coming in through taxes. People were losing their jobs. They weren't paying income tax. They weren't spending money, so we weren't getting sales tax. So we had to cut budgets, and it was important to understand how our actions in cutting budgets were affecting everyday Idaho families. And we need to do the same now. These budget cuts are being proposed. I mean, we're talking anywhere from, $500 million to $1 billion. And if you do that, what it means is you're cutting public education. So, it's going to affect your kids' classroom. You're cutting Medicaid budgets, which means people are going to lose health insurance and the ability to pay for their medical needs. It means that roads and bridges aren't going to be repaired. It's a big deal. And so we need to find out how our decisions are going to affect families in our communities.
And in addition to that, I know we're early in the legislative season, so you've mentioned a little bit before, but what would you say are your main priorities for the remainder of this season? What do you hope to accomplish this session?
Yeah, so I'm really focused on these budget deficits and finding a way to humanely address the issue. My big push is that we look to our rainy day funds. We have $1.6 billion in our rainy day funds, which we smartly put there in case we needed them. when we had an unexpected drop in revenue, and that's what we're facing right now. So we have $1.6 billion in rainy day funds. We could use a third of those this year while we're waiting for our revenues to come back up. We still have, according to economists, a good economy here in Idaho. And so once the revenues return, we can just fill those coffers back up. But we could use a third of the rainy day funds. We should get rid of the voucher, the $50 million voucher program that sends $50 million to private schools and religious schools with no accountability. That was a bad bill when we passed it last year. We shouldn't have done it, and we need to get rid of it. That puts $50 million back into the coffers. And then we passed a $450 million tax cut last year. We couldn't afford it. We shouldn't have done it. We should put a hold on at least $250 million of that tax cut, put a trigger on the bill so that it only goes into effect when we can afford it. And right now we can't. So if you do all three of those or some combination of those proposals, they're very simple, they're common sense, and we can solve our budget crisis.
And is there anything this session that you are working with to propose, or anything that you are most looking forward to debating or discussing in the legislature?
Yeah, I've got a bill on guardianship and conservatorships. It's a comprehensive rewrite of those statutes that deal with guardianships or conservatorships. So, think like Britney Spears. She had a conservatorship that unfairly prevented her from really living her life. And we have been working on this bill for about 3 or 4 years, and we're ready to get it through the legislature this year. So it does a number of different things. Before the state can take away your rights through a conservatorship or guardianship, it has to be clearly proven that one is needed. And make sure that we use the smallest tools available. Like, instead of going straight to a guardianship or a conservatorship, there may be some lesser tool that you could use to accomplish what's needed. So supported decision-making or one-time protective arrangements are a couple of examples of that. And then third, if a guardian is appointed, we make sure we protect the relationships and the dignity of the person who has the guardianship. We just limit isolation. We make sure there's an individualized plan for the person to follow, stuff like that. So anyway, it's I think it's a good piece of legislation, and it's bipartisan, and we've been working hard on it.
And again, Senator, we just want to thank you for your time. I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
What would you say is the best way for your constituents to be involved in the legislative process?
Well, the legislature has a great website. You just go to, you Google Idaho legislature and you'll find the website. It's a .gov website. But there's a few things. One, I'm going to have these 3 town halls. I would love to see people come to one of the 3. The first one's going to be on the Medicaid cuts. I'm going to be just listening to constituents to find out how Medicaid cuts will affect them. And then, the next 2, we'll talk about different pieces of legislation, probably talk more about budgets. That's one of the best ways that you can get involved. But I'd also say, if they come to Boise during the legislative session and they want to meet with me, I will do my best to make time for them and listen to their concerns. So, there's lots of ways they can get involved, and I hope they do. I hope they let legislators know how they feel about what we're considering, especially when it comes to these budget cuts.
Great. And thank you so much, Senator Ruchti. We're grateful for the opportunity we had to interview you today and the great work that you're doing in Boise. So thank you so much for your time.